Hello, my name's James. I'm a portrait photographer here in the UK and pointer and shooter behind the project A Portrait of a Wrestler. And this week, video number 3, we're going to be discussing getting into wrestling photography. It's a question I'm often asked: how do you get to shoot ringside? How do you get to shoot, particularly how do you get to shoot portraits of wrestlers? And the simple answer is that I ask them. This whole project started back in 2014 when I needed to go for a qualification, and the professional qualification I wanted to go for was a thing called a fellowship. There's a number of professional bodies, both nationally and internationally, that will assess your work and judge where you are on the professional scale. The fellowship's the highest level, and it's a goal that I set myself that I wanted to achieve. But in order to get that, I needed to shoot a body of work, typically sort of 20 large, sort of 20 by 16 images, presented in front of a panel of judges. I needed to present a project that was different, something that was unique, and I was always a wrestling fan, so I kind of had that behind me, but I didn't know any wrestlers, didn't really know how to get into the industry, but I knew that it was something that I had a passion about and something that I could sort of follow to conclusion. It took me 6 months to shoot the project. It took me 6 months just to get inside the wrestling bubble. I couldn't get a single wrestler to return any of my emails for the first sort of 4 months of the project, and it eventually came down to literally visiting a show here in Portsmouth, a Revolution pro wrestling show, for which I'll always be grateful that I turned up at. I came along to the show with some work from Rob Schamberger, who's a guy you should check out online. He's currently working for WWE. He paints in oils and watercolors of WWE superstars and sells them online, both through the WWE website and privately. And at the time he was running a Kickstarter which I was following online, where he was trying to paint every world champion that there had ever been in the world and to travel across America doing it. And I happily funded his Kickstarter and got all of his stuff in the post, and I just thought the way that he put the characters across was brilliant, and I thought it was something I could do photographically. So it took me a while to get hold of a wrestler and to convince them to have their picture taken by me, and it actually took me to go to a show. And we're going to talk about my first photo shoot in another video, but for this video I want to talk about the second guy that I met in wrestling, which is Andy Simmons, who you can see here. Andy was kind enough to lend me his support and to come in for a photo shoot when I asked him at a Revolution Pro Wrestling show. Asked him before the show started, showed him the Schamberger stuff, showed him some of my own work, and he said, yeah, no, I'd love to get involved. And it turns out that Andy lives no more than, or at the time lived no more than 2-minute walk away from me, so I'd spent sort of 6 months chasing wrestlers, not realising that he lived 2 minutes down the road from me. So we booked him in for the following week, and I'll never forget, he came in and he bought all his gear, painted his face as you can see in this photo here, and bought with him a chair with a massive dent in it, which he said, oh, I knocked someone on the head with that last weekend, so I thought we might be able to use that to get something different. But Andy was great. Andy was really open and honest during the session, spoke about his time, as he will to anyone who asks, standing in a ring across from Vince McMahon, getting ready to have a 3 stages of hell match with Umaga. And I'm just going to share with you some of the images that we took in the session, just to show you how the project developed. As it was kind of like a bartering tool in the session, I didn't expect him to sort of come along for free. I wanted him to get something from it, and at the time, obviously, the standard wrestling promos like this were kind of easy to do. This is a basic 2-light setup, believe it or not. The WWE and other promotions will shoot this with like a 7-light setup, and if you've got the space and the time, then that's great. I don't have the space and the time. I have a loft conversion, which isn't very big at all, with a sloping roof, so it's just proof that you can shoot anything in a small space. But these images were shot with just sort of like one, I guess, backlight here, which has been photoshopped out, which is just shooting 2 stops overexposed onto a painted brick wall, where the brick wall's painted in white paint, and then the main light over on this side here just shooting across Andy and just giving us as much exposure as possible. So these were like the bartering tool to sort of say, hey look, you can have these for sort of like your match cards, and I still see these occasionally on match cards in and around Portsmouth. But I really wanted to do something different. I guess my first foray into doing something different was this shot here. I didn't know what the Portrait of a Wrestler project was going to look like, and eventually it would lend itself to sort of like a style of black and white pictures on a dark background, very low-key style. But initially I wanted to do something sort of like a bit more detailed, something with a bit of structure to it, something that really showed the aggression, and something a little bit different, just a panel of work where we were just taking profile shots. I still quite like this shot. I'm not sure that it works for everyone, that it would be potentially the most flattering. In my mind, it's probably slightly over-processed for my tastes, and maybe hasn't sort of aged particularly well. We moved on to shooting Andy on a black backdrop, which we sort of hung from our studio, and this dry ice here that you see is literally pumped in from a smoke machine, just in and around Andy there. I don't think there's a backlight on this either. I think it's a simple, just a one light setup, but we've just got him stood there, made sure that he's all oiled up, so we've got nice sort of reflection on the skin tones to really make the most of that. And I just started to like the feel of this image. We started to play around a little bit with low key. This image here was another sort of test shot, I guess we did. We wanted him straight on, and in the square crop I'm experimenting with like maybe having a panel of work that's like a square. It's a bare bulb setup, shooting straight into Andy here. So if we go super close around here, you'll see just a single catch light there. Catch lights are quite key in sort of classical portraiture. You're trying to get them either at, this is what I call a 10 o'clock catch light, you can have a 2 o'clock catch light over here, but they have to be sort of there and sort of on the line of the iris and the pupil. Gives you sort of like a correct classical, I suppose, lighting catch light there. This mist here has been provided by a water bottle which we squirted over Andy at the time. It's not covered. I wanted it sort of covering perfectly, but I was holding the camera in one hand and I guess a water bottle in the other. Rembrandt lighting hasn't quite worked here. We've got a bit of a gap here between the nose shadow and the side shadow here, so I'd like the light round a little bit more, and got a little bit of a shadow down here. So it's not the greatest shot, but once again we're at the experimental stage. Experimenting again here with sort of like square crops with him and post-production and desaturating the tones and getting these sort of two rim lights either side. Once again, just working with a simple 2 light setup. Nice low angle to make him look nice and dominating. And then this one here where we've got sort of looking straight into the camera. The lights are too far around here though, because just sort of like lending to sort of like a dark face there, which wasn't something that I liked, the sort of high reflections there. Working again with this aggressive sort of stance, having him looking towards the camera. Panoramic softbox above and a reflector underneath. You can see that in the catch lights in the eyes sort of here. The eyes and where the catch lights are tend to give you the clues as to where lights are in a picture and how to light up pictures. This is again a 1 light setup, technically a 2 light setup if you count the reflector. And I kind of like the intensity there that Andy's got. The face paint makes this picture. But I think my favourite one is the first one I showed you from this. Slightly high angle on Andy, sort of emerging from the darkness. 2 lights either side, just giving us a fairly even sort of lighting there. Something a little bit different, something a little bit eerie about this. Eventually it isn't one that would make itself into the project, but what Andy did do was, because he was a promoter and he also hosted a local training school, is that we did such a good job for him when we were like professional and nice and all those sort of things. He recommended us to his flatmate, who we'll talk about in another video, but also all of the kids in his training school. So they came down to us for their sort of first promo pictures. People like Curtis Chapman came down and had a promo picture taken with us, and eventually the panel would sort of work its way up to looking something like this. This is like a little bit of a spoiler of maybe another video we're going to do in the future, where we're going to take individuals from this panel and just talk about them. People like Doug Williams, people like Jimmy Havoc, people like Pastor William Eva, Lord Gideon Gray, and everyone else who got involved in the project. But I think that's for a later video. So yeah, basically getting into wrestling photography took a bit of time. It required someone to have trust in us, someone who was willing to take a chance on us, and someone who was willing also to recommend us. It's never really in life about what you know or who you know. It's certainly a lot about what you know, but it's also about who you know, who's willing to put their reputation on the line for you. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll be back next week to go back to part 2 of 3 of the Jimmy Havoc Mark Haskins hardcore match from Progress at Alexandra Palace. We're going to take you to a barbed wire table in your future. But if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your mates, tell people that you like, and as ever, all the very best.